Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Ignition Time. It's very clear that the rich have gotten richer during the pandemic and the poor got poorer. The rich increased their wealth by trillions of dollars, whereas the poor were dependent on stimulus checks and unemployment benefits. But now, I believe America is taking a stand because a lot of individuals are quitting, resigning, and not going back to work unless they can work on their terms. But, folks, the shocking news is that dozens, and you'll see this headline on your screen from the Washington Post. The shocking news is that dozens of America's biggest businesses paid no federal income taxes again. In fact, 55 corporations had zero federal tax liability. In other words, they paid zero to the federal government by way of taxes in 2020, including household names like Nike, FedEx, and Dish Network. Think about this for a second. 55 of the nation's largest corporations paid no federal income tax on more than $40 billion in profits last year. And this was according to an analysis by the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, which is a progressive think tank. Here's the article on your screen from the ITEP. 55 corporations paid zero in federal taxes on 2020 profits. Think about that for a second. Let's show you the 55 profitable companies that avoided all federal income taxes in 2020. As we scroll down this list, you'll see some prominent names right there. Advanced Micro Devices, that's AMD. As we scroll down, you'll see prominent names like Dish Network, Duke Energy, FedEx, and these huge companies that, again, paid no federal income tax. Now, the CARES Act actually helped companies avoid federal income taxes. In fact, these companies received a rebate from the federal government of more than $3 billion for an effective tax rate of negative 9%. So think about this. Not only did these companies not pay federal income taxes, they actually received a credit from the federal government of $3 billion. So instead of paying taxes, they actually had a negative 9% rate. They got paid to make money. I want you to think about this. According to the authors of the study, their total corporate tax breaks for 2020, including $8.5 billion in tax avoidance and $3.5 billion in rebates, comes to $12 billion. Now, 26 corporations have paid no federal income taxes since 2017, again, including household names like Nike, FedEx, and Dish Network. These companies have not paid any taxes to the federal government since 2016. And combined, these 26 companies have booked more than $77 billion in profits since 2018, while receiving nearly $5 billion, and their effective 3-year tax rate is negative 6%. So what did FedEx have to say about this? Well, they simply said, FedEx pays all of its taxes owed to local, state, federal, and foreign governments. Yeah, right. In other words, they're saying, we pay everything. Well, the truth is, to the federal government, they didn't pay anything since 2018. And FedEx also said, through the third quarter of fiscal year 2021, FedEx has paid nearly $2 billion in U.S. federal income tax in the last 10 years. Oh, yeah, right. You make tens of billions of dollars and you paid $2 billion over the past 10 years. You probably paid taxes prior to 2018. And what they're trying to do is make it seem like they paid taxes, whereas in reality, they didn't pay taxes. Now, Gardner, who's the study's lead author, said this via email. By all appearances, the companies described in this report appear to be using entirely legal means to reduce their tax bills. Many of the tax provisions these companies are using exist because they themselves have lobbied heavily for their creation. In other words, these companies use their power, their influence to encourage Congress to have policies where they pay less taxes, and which did indeed end up happening. Not only did they pay no taxes, but they also received rebates. Now, by the way, in case you're wondering, how is this possible? Why is this fair? Folks, here's a rationale by the federal government. If they make sure that these companies don't pay taxes, they try and encourage these companies to create jobs and to invest in buildings, in infrastructure, in research and development. That money flows through the economy and that money leads to more jobs. And when more jobs are created, that's how the federal government gets their money. So, let's say these companies hire, let's just say 100,000 workers. each of these workers pays taxes to the federal government, and that's how the federal government gets their money. Now, the federal government's rationale is if we charge heavy taxes or if we increase the tax rate on these companies will then cut back on hiring, which, by the way, is a rationale of the Republicans. That's why the Republicans were instrumental in cutting taxes in 2017 under former President Trump. They cut the corporate income tax rate substantially, and the CARES Act actually made it easier for companies to legally avoid paying taxes. Again, the whole rationale is if the company pays less taxes, they are more likely to spend that money in infrastructure, in benefits, in salaries and wages, in giving bonuses to their employees. And then these employees, then a big chunk of their salary goes to the federal government. So in the end, if in case you're thinking, oh, the federal government was scammed by these companies. No, folks. This is all part of a bigger game, a bigger scam, if you will, where the companies and the executives and the CEOs get richer. Their shareholders get richer because their stock prices go up. So the shareholders start to see increasing stock prices, get their dividends. And by the way, the richest amongst us happen to be shareholders. The poorest amongst us don't hold any stock in any company. So what happens is that the rich get richer because the shareholders of the companies get richer. The CEOs of the companies get millions of dollars in salaries. They drive around in fancy cars, chauffeurs, limousines, and they fly around in private jets while their workers, even though the worker might be paid a six-figure salary, almost half of the income of the worker, when you include state taxes, goes back to the state and federal government. So that's eventually how all of this works. So I want our viewers and subscribers to know that this isn't some big scam by these companies. What they're doing is perfectly legal, but it is at a high level a game designed to make sure that the low wage earner, the middle income earner, pays taxes to the federal government. So that really is what is going on here. Now, prior to the pandemic, corporate profits as a share of gross domestic product were twice as high as in the period from 1980 to 2000. But now, nearly 7 in 10 Americans say that corporations are paying too little in taxes. In fact, President Biden has called for a higher corporate tax rate to fund his entire package, as well as a higher minimum tax on income earned by American companies overseas. And President Biden said this: "We are asking corporate America to pay their fair share." So I want you to tell me whether you agree or disagree with this entire thesis of companies paying no federal income tax, but instead creating jobs. And according to Gardner, the lead author of that study I showed you at the start of this episode of Ignition Time, we all want to see businesses investing more in the US, whether it's creating productive capacity or just creating jobs. Similarly, all Americans want to see businesses engaging in more research and development, and the R&D tax credit is another prominent factor driving the tax avoidance that we see here. So folks, there's a lot of tax credits available to companies, and these tax credits allow the companies to pay almost no taxes. Gardner also said this: President Biden's proposal will not directly repeal any tax breaks, but would reduce the cost of many existing breaks. If this is what's politically doable, it's certainly better than doing nothing at all. Now, according to the Business Roundtable Chief Executive Joshua Bolten, he said this: President Biden's proposal is already something they're not happy about. He said this: by significantly increasing taxes on corporations, the proposal would be counterproductive to the goal of increasing economic growth and job creation. Now, folks, there is another aspect to this. A lot of progressive groups have been supportive of this entire idea. Now, in a statement, the corporate tax increases are good policy, good for the economy, according to the Roosevelt Institute. And we'll show you that headline on your screen right now. And according to that statement from a progressive think tank, robust taxation of corporations and the wealthy can directly counter damaging inequality, rebalance power in our economy, and increase the competitiveness of American workers. Let me know whether you think these large corporations should pay more in taxes. Now, I want you to know that all of our fellow Americans, even those on a very low income, pay more federal income taxes than big companies like Amazon last year. And if you think that something is wrong with this picture, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications. I appreciate you. A ton of effort goes into the creation, the production of these videos, and you can thank us by clicking the like button, by clicking subscribe, and by enabling notifications. Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.